Hey, thanks, guys. Appreciate you taking the time to join me. And we have a lot of parents out there that need help parenting in a pandemic. And thank God you are here to give them all the answers.
We have them.
Yeah, so good. So why don't you just take a moment, introduce yourselves, and say why you're here and why you're such a fount of wisdom.
Okay, well, I'll answer a few of those things, but I'm Chelsea Thompson. I am on staff at Granite Bay, Bayside, in the special needs ministry. And prior to saying yes to full-time ministry, I worked in the public school system for 4 years and really enjoyed my time there teaching kids and teens who were both neurotypical and some with special needs in 2nd and 3rd grades.
I'm Tammy. I am a homeschool mom. I have 3 kids. Let's see, hold there. 20, 15, and 13. So I've been homeschooling for 15 years. Still not sure if I know what I'm doing. And to add to that, to our home, my husband is a public school teacher.
Okay.
So he teaches 3rd grade, which makes it
The best age for sure.
yeah.
Great.
And I'm Carol Holt, and I am on staff at Adventure Christian School as an administrator. And Bayside has a school and located at our Adventure campus. And I'm here, I've been in education for 37 years. And I've never seen anything like this before. I've been a kindergarten teacher, a 4th grade teacher. Now I got demoted to be a principal and an administrator. And I was a principal at Forest Lake Christian School, and then now transferred up to Adventure Christian School.
Fabulous.
I'm Bobby Delorto. I'm a 1st grade teacher in Roseville, and my husband Brandon and I attend the Bayside campus in Granite Bay. So hopefully I will have some insights as to, I don't feel like I'm an expert at all. I feel like very much thrown into all of this online teaching, not what I would love to be doing, but hopefully some insight. And also we have our youngest child is still at home, a 15-year-old who's doing online learning for the first time. And so just coming at it also from a parent's perspective.
And then I'm her lesser half. I'm Brandon Delorto. I've been a high school teacher since 1990, so this is my 31st year, so I'm still looking at getting my ticket punched for the plus 35. Mostly history, taught English, taught drama, I've taught a number of different things, but always high school. But to kind of piggyback on those, I've been doing this so long, and I'm always amazed how much I learn every year. So as we talk to parents about any of this, put it in context, you could be doing this job for 30 years and still be learning things. So if you're all of a sudden dumped into teaching your own kids in a partnership with parents, it's okay to not know exactly what you're doing at first, because it's a very steep climb to get really good at this. So.
Absolutely. Oh, I am so glad you're here, because I need every one of you. I'm one of those parents that suddenly was a parent and then I became school principal. I mean, how did that happen overnight? And so we all need help. I've got 2 still in high school. We're working through everything. The last season, when sort of like COVID got off to a start, that whole spring term was a little gnarly. We've got a new term coming up, and I think the main thing is, I'll maybe address this at first, is parents just feel overwhelmed. Well, what can we say to parents at this? Should they, jump ship, run away, or go to Maui, swim, or whatever? What should parents do? Because they feel overwhelmed, they feel under-resourced in that way, and a lot of parents I'm finding are beating themselves up. Any initial encouragement, keep watching the show?
Well, I think the first thing that parents need to hear right now is that they are not the only one who's feeling this way, that we're all, like you're saying, this is a learning curve for all of us. This is my first pandemic, as Kurt likes to say. So I think we're all just kind of learning as we go. And that's encouraging to me to know that, hey, there's other people out there that understand.
That's great. You don't have to have it all figured out.
Good.
And I think, and what Brandon said was, we're still learning as educators. All of us as educators, you're lifelong learners. And so don't feel like you have to have everything figured out. You won't have everything figured out. We as teachers and administrators don't have everything figured out. And I think, Chelsea, you'd said earlier, we're alone. We're alone. You're not alone in this. And sometimes we feel alone, but you're not alone. And we need to have resources and a voice to really reach out and get support from other parents or even the school.
And I think too, to know that in the spring when I was teaching in this pandemic time, my heart went out to my families. I just felt terrible for what they were having to go through. And we don't have young children, and we felt grateful to not have young children while we were trying to work, but we certainly could empathize with what that was like. And we had people, colleagues who were struggling with it. So we felt terrible. I mean, we felt very responsible for doing our job, but we felt terrible for what our families were going through.
And I guess just to really know that you're not the only one feeling this way. I mean, everybody's feeling this way. The teachers are feeling like we're failing because we know what's possible in a normal year. The parents are often being expected to continue to work and to teach and to manage the house and all these things. And so I think if everyone just kind of notches down their level of internal expectations, it's easier to survive through this. Yeah. It's okay to be just okay. Yeah. At least at first. And then depending on how this lasts, if it goes all the way through the first term or until January or whenever the numbers are, it will get better. You'll get better at it. You'll figure out things, and we'll all work with that. And I think a great idea is to use each other's resources. Just talk. But the talking should be constructive. It shouldn't be destructive. It shouldn't be to just vent that you're frustrated at this or you're frustrated at that. I think if everyone just kind of gives each other that grace to just take the time to not be perfect at it, it'll be as good as it can get given the circumstances.
That's fabulous, fabulous. So let's get practical. We want to turn living rooms into classrooms. So for the parent that's thinking, hey, the time's counting down, term one is about to start, what can we say to them practically? What's the best way to even get prepared for that moment? Any thoughts?
You want to start with the littlest of guys? You got the youngest of the group.
Well, I still don't have a whole game plan in my head yet because our district is still coming up with its game plan and hasn't passed it all on to teachers yet. But I've been thinking, one thing I'm going to recommend to my families as I talk with them before we get started, kind of like a back to school night, but I'll be doing it individually, is to please have a schedule for your child, have a routine of getting up in the morning, of getting dressed, of having breakfast and getting ready to learn. So when we're on our Zoom calls, your child's not eating their breakfast, and not just like you would do in a normal classroom.
Make it as normal as possible.
Yeah, and children know how to act in a classroom. I mean, I have first grade, but they know from kindergarten what's expected. So to make it as normal as possible. So but that's one thing I am going to recommend, just a schedule and we do this every day and this is how we do it to make it a little more manageable, just kind of setting the tone.
And I think most of the public schools are going to help in that because they're going to have a different setup from everything I've been hearing than we did in March when this became kind of, we're figuring out as we were going. It might be 2 weeks, then it became 4 weeks, then it became after spring break, and everything kept shifting. And I think what we try to do is to be as flexible as possible with all parents in all circumstances. So the kids could be on with the teacher at the moment, or the lesson was recorded, the kid could watch it later at night, they could do it tonight, they could do it tomorrow and we had super flexible time for kids to turn in work. And so what we're trying to do is we found that allowed people to kind of devolve down a bit into kind of the lowest common expectations. Okay. And so what most of the schools I've heard, they're going to have some sort of live classroom, and the expectation is that kids will be engaged. Now, there's always going to be exceptions, childcare issues, things like that, but we're going to try to make it as normal as you can so the kids can feel that it's a regular school year as best you can. So if you can stick to that part of the schedule, I mean, there are family things that are going to come up, like they always do, and you still be people and still have family time. Right. But try to make it not feel like it's a chore, but rather something they would have been doing had this been normal. Okay, so
talk to us even for parents advice with Zoom, because I mean for a couple of months it felt like death by Zoom. I mean, have we got to watch our kids watching Zoom? How do we know they're actually watching Zoom and not on something else? What's the secret to a great Zoom experience for school?
Well, I think first, before even you get on Zoom, schools have a very robust filter. when it comes to Wi-Fi. And so I think it's really important that you check your Wi-Fi settings and make sure that if your kids are going to be plugged in on devices, make sure your filter at home is set to where it's G-rated.
Yeah.
Because Zoom, I know there were challenges with Zoom and security, but they've really taken care of that.
Yeah.
So I think check your filter just to start with, as you're preparing for this, see what kind of filter your internet provider has and what's on it and how you can get parental controls in. So that's, I think, a good place to start.
So look, make sure the children are safe.
Are safe first.
Yes.
Right, are safe first. And then I think Zoom, I know I found Zoom fatigue is real.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
I think we did everything we could in a hurry to, just like public schools, we did the same thing. You had to flip, you had to pivot, and you went from on-site to online.
Okay.
Now we're more intentional and we're planning differently because it may be the first quarter or like into January, we don't know. So we're much more intentional with the schedule, with the expectations, with the more, we want students turning in work, just like the
Yes.
typical class day, but it's not going to be 6 hours long.
Yeah.
And so I know we're looking at, depending on the age of first grader, what
Yeah.
a first grader can do to what an eighth grader can do. What's that length of time? So we have to take all of that into consideration. So Zoom will be a part of it, but not all of it.
Okay. All right.
Go ahead. Do you?
Okay.
What we noticed with ours is that because we were just trying to let everyone survive in the spring, is that we would, as teachers, not really get on the kids if they weren't on, if they didn't have their camera on. And we had different circumstances start popping up. I had one kid, I won't mention the name, put the phone down while we're having class and went running off into the field doing some soccer stuff and was 20 or 30 yards down the field. And I'm like, so we're going to be a bit, it's the wrong adjective, but we're going to be much more insistent that they're interacting, that you don't just turn the camera off and now I don't even know if you're there or not, just to see if there's eye contact, same as you would in class.
Yeah.
You can kind of see when kids are dazing out. So I think if you can support that. Another element I think for parents as far as the Zoom meetings are concerned to make sure they're actually focusing is the whole kind of Ronald Reagan, trust but verify. Give your kids a little bit of room, but check on them every once in a while. Make sure they're not sitting on their phone over here.
Right, okay.
Because as anybody's had one Zoom meeting, you know that you can sit there and have your phone right here. And to most people, when you're this little square, they can't tell that you're looking at your phone instead. So maybe just that drop in every once in a while, just to make sure that your kids are still staying online and doing their things.
Our son has that actually mastered pretty well. We've actually
Yes, there
I
are
saw
many
him do-
skill sets that he's been working on
Yes.
during this
All the
COVID time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
She had fun. Oh my gosh. I'd get to hear her Zoom meetings with her little guys, and they were just the cutest things because the kids would, tell them about your first when you let them all.
Well, yeah, it's a little chaotic, but I've also been taken into like Grandpa's bathroom with the iPad, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh. So definitely, just having
Wow.
guidelines like that, like
Okay.
for sure we stay in a place and we don't wander throughout the house because Grandpa doesn't want me to. I mean, nothing was
Grandpa's
happening,
not
but
going
yeah.
to school. Yeah. Oh, that's hilarious. So, so Brandon, you taught my daughter
Right.
last year,
And I gave her the aid just as you paid for.
Oh yeah, thank you so much. That
Still
does
taping?
work. Bribery, it's a wonderful thing. But I mean, your lessons were legendary. They were fantastic. I remember, like, my AP US really went up. I was like round the corner listening in, thinking I want to be part of this. And your classes, I'm not just saying it because you were here, but they were phenomenal. She found them engaging. So as a parent, I was thrilled, and I was giving you marks out of 10. How do parents not become judges of teachers in that way? How can parents at this moment in time help teachers? How do we get that relationship going when everything's about social distance? And any thoughts on that?
I think we talked about that a little bit. I mean, giving teachers grace, giving yourself grace, and just being very, giving it time to get working. And if you feel like something isn't, being very open and honest, but in a very respectful, courteous way, and just letting them know, they're professionals. So letting them know professionally if something isn't working, or if you would like to see things go a different way, and just having kindness and grace and understanding that it's very difficult for everyone.
For our kids who have special needs, most of the ones that I work with attend either an NPS, which is a non-public school, or our are now being homeschooled. And so they aren't having the same types of classroom learning, online learning setups that some of the other schools are. And I noticed that they're ready to just not do another Zoom ever again.
Yeah.
But the parents are concerned that their IEPs will not be met during this season. And I think, like you were saying, it's so important that we have grace for the teachers, because they're doing everything they can, and there's just some things that are going to be out of their control, unfortunately.
I think we talked about also that, you have new kids coming in that you don't know. You don't have those relationships built with them yet. So it's you're gonna need the parents to kind of help you understand their needs and their, who they are, because last year you knew those students and you ended that year with them.
Right.
But this is a whole new class. Everything is different.
And so how do we help kids then bond in the classroom, in the Zoom room? What is the strategy? How can parents help? Hey, stay apart from them, but get to know them. Science, please help me.
I think part of that is things that we do typically in the classroom, student of the week or student of the day, where or the student star or something like that, that's going to give a student a platform to share about themselves. And then everyone hears about that student. And so that's, I think, one way where you can get to know each other in that environment. Also, play dates, socially distanced, outdoor, at a park.
Okay.
Giving parents the ideas to get to know each other off of Zoom, because there are some ways that we can still, like being out here socially distanced outside. And so we want to encourage families to still be able to do that. But highlighting students, giving them an opportunity to share who they are. And like Tammy said, this is a new school year.
Yeah.
The privilege of relationships isn't part of our online learning. And so we're going to be creative. How do we do back to school night? We used to have, 500, 1,000 people on campus for back to school night, and you visited the classrooms and you dropped off your supplies, and how are we going to get to know our students? And so part of that is individual.
It's crazy, like homecoming when we've never left home.
Yeah.
I want to get out of it.
Homestaying.
Yeah, homestaying.
Homestay, right. So we have to be creative. And that's what I loved what you said about giving our teachers grace and being empathetic, because we're learning right along with you how to be the best Zoom teacher, online teacher. We got our degrees. We were on-site teachers. We know how to do that. And so it's just figuring out how best to really connect via the internet.
Yeah.
And I think people over just the normal life of a school, from kindergarten all the way through, come to find that there's a reality that is always there. You can have your own child. You can be coaching their soccer team. You can be coaching their little league team. After they get to a certain age, they don't want to listen to anything you have to say. But if some other man who's their coach says the exact same thing, now it's the gospel of what I should be doing when I step up to the plate.
You're a genius.
So there's a little bit of that no matter what. Where most of us work is that we kind of work in partnership if it's a good situation with parents. So the kids are naturally going to rebel a little bit, however they do. And teachers can come in and kind of work together. But we can't get to know them the same way as we would in a normal year. And what I've noticed since about year 10, my first thing I try to do right off the bat is get to know my kids as fast as I can. And I usually have about 40 kids, so it's not easy, and 3 versions of them. And then I ride motocycles with them when I get a chance.
There's a kid that's disappeared.
Get
on a Zoom.
Go do your homework.
In school.
But that's going to be really artificial this year. So it's probably going to take your teachers longer to be able to figure out what little kind of emotional social wedge things they can use with kids. Some kids need kind of a kick in the pants to get them motivated. That will break other kids if you look at them with a kind of like disdainful, I can't believe you did this. For some kids, that might be the motivation that finally puts them on the track. And we are going to have such a hard time, and it's going to take so much longer to get to know the kids that way this year.
Yeah.
So I would just say be patient. Be patient with yourself. Be patient with the teachers. As you said, communicate with emails. Most of the teachers I've known in my career, are fine, and then we want to talk with parents, as long as it's not an accusatory thing, because that just puts us on the defensive, just like anybody else would be. You know, what's going wrong? I can't believe, you know, how can we work together? Find a way to kind of work with your teachers, and I think most of that will fall into place.
Partnership's keyword, yes. Absolutely.
I think this is also an opportunity for families. I mean, this is the big benefit that we have in our family, is that they get to know their siblings. You know what I mean? And they have an opportunity to come alongside each other and help them with their schoolwork, maybe. You know, yeah, they can't necessarily go out and play with their friends, but they can play with each other, you know? My kids, I mean, even lunch, you know, they sit and have lunch together. And there's times where they're sitting there at the table for an hour and a half, and I'm like, we need to get back to school. And they're like, and then I think, no, this is beautiful. This is what I want. I want my kids to have that relationship with each other, you know, and they laugh and they have their inside jokes. And so I think this time is just a really great opportunity for families to be together and to get to know each other, you know? And I think when we were looking into homeschooling, it was like elementary school and pretty much middle school is the only time where kids are with their own age, you know? And so we do kind of a little disservice to kids in how to interact with people of different ages, you know, and adults, that kind of thing. So you see, you know, my kids are all different ages, but yet they can relate to each other, they can talk to each other, they can talk to adults. You know what I mean? Because they're not just with kids of their own age. So that's a benefit right now that we can take advantage of, you know.
Fantastic.
Well, that's just a great way to connect it to life lessons in general, and everything we've all heard in the gospel over time is you can look at it as look at all the things we're losing this year that we don't have and how bad it is, or just know that it is what it is. It's where we are. It's our circumstance. So what positives can come out of it? What kind of things can you do? Can you take a little half day off or whatever and do a little longer for lunch, or, you know, try to get your younger brother to work with the older brother, and can you teach him the math that you learned back? There's so many of those connections that can be found in this that just don't happen in normal time. So.
And I think that's important because our kids are going to pick up on our attitude.
Oh yeah.
And the more positive we can be, even though we're afraid and we would rather have our kids in school, but if our attitude is positive, they'll approach it with a much more positive attitude as well.
Yeah. So let's get really practical down to turning a living room into a classroom. I mean, do they need a brand new Mac? Do they, you know, should they have their own desks? Should there be a chalkboard, you know, beside the fireplace? I mean, describe this to me, you know?
I do have a whiteboard next to my fireplace.
Bookshelf.
You know, what does the, you know, I mean, the absolutely committed parent, but amateur teacher, I'm an amateur teacher.
Right.
What do I do? Do you know, do I need a school yearbook, and what do I do?
I think,
No, go ahead.
I mean, I just think every student is different. You know, every home is different. Every situation is going to be different. There's no right or wrong answer there. You know, there's also, hey, let's try this. Doesn't work? Let's try something else. You know, we have that freedom to be able to do that. I have one student who we love couch time. You know, we love to sit in our chair and a half and read together. I have another one who likes to sit at her desk, and then another one who likes to sit on his bed. So it's like wherever they feel comfortable doing their work is what it looks like.
To work with them.
Yeah.
For our kids, I think similar to that, they have different areas that work for them. But I think once you find that one that works, make sure you're consistent with that same spot. I think for one of the kids I tutor, I just have a box with the school supplies in it, and that way, wherever I set the box, now the dining table has become, this is our workspace. Now you are in that mode, and as soon as we pack everything up, move the box, now it's just our dining table again. So it doesn't have to be a Mac, it doesn't have to be an actual desk. You can turn the area with your And your kids know my bed is where I get to work.
I mean, wherever they want to go. Really. I think there's a lot of parents freaking out. Like, I have to make my house like their classroom. You know, that feel of a classroom. And that's not what it's not going to be beneficial to them. You know what I mean? It's like they're at home. So you need to do what's works for you and your family.
And I think a lot is dependent on the age, and that I think elementary needs more oversight. So you wouldn't want maybe them to be a little first grader in their bedroom door shut.
Yeah.
But again, based on age, I think that's important. And I think preparing, even as a parent, the night before, make sure their devices are charged, because that could be a problem if the Zoom call or the live teaching's going on and they have no battery life. But so those are little things that will help your day go smoother. If the night before you check, hey, we got our supplies, your device is charging and ready to go. And I know most schools, us included, if a parent doesn't have a device, we check it out to them. We make it available, whether an iPad or a Chromebook. And so those are things that parents can reach out to their school district. And it shouldn't come out of their pocket. It should be part of what their resources are from their local school.
Okay.
What did you notice worked best with your little guys in terms of?
Well, I noticed my families, like you said, that were very organized, and I think most elementary teachers sent home packets of work. So our goal was to have as little computer time. At least that was always my goal. I mean, Zoom times, yes, but I really don't want those 6-year-olds on a computer or on a device any more than they have to be. So having their work for the day, I would send all of their work by day and just making sure they had their work and it was ready to go. Because when you're in a small group with 7 children and then one doesn't have their, and then they're off they go and you're thinking, well, who knows? Who knows when I'm gonna, So just making sure they're prepared and they have what they need and they're ready to work and they're ready to be successful. So if they need to write, they're in a place they can write and they can.
And they're not scrounging, looking for a pencil or whatever, all those things are fun. I on my side, I think, I get high schoolers and I teach juniors, and so really, my job in normal years is the same as it is this year, but just with a different twist, which is they're 1.5 years away from being on their own. And we're not going to be able to sit and say, you need to go study in the dorms. You're going to be, we can call them every once in a while. We can still berate them if they don't do well and we see the grades, but that daily, nightly thing. So what I try to get them to do is transition into their own reality of being responsible for their own study skills, their own study habits, their own way they do it. And I agree with you in that sense that at the older ages, whatever works. The thing I ask the kids to do is to be honest with yourself. So if you're lying down in the bed trying to read an entire chapter and your body basically goes, hey, I know what lying down means. That means I get ready to go to bed and everything's shutting down. Or on this hand, you've got a group Snapchat going along. In this hand, you've got your Xbox, and then on your foot, you're changing different, Spotify songs because you don't like the one you got. And you've got to be really honest, and you've got to have that conversation with your kid. Is this really working for you? Because at first, most kids are going to say, yeah, this is just the way I do it. Well, is it working? Is it really working? Not in an accusatory way, but just try to help them figure out what's their best style. Because it is different. We dated in high school, we dated in college. She needed quiet places to study. I needed places that had more animation, or I would nod off. Our two styles were so different. So finding what works.
How's that working out still?
Well, I'm always right, so there's that.
I've learned to defer. I don't go to Promise Keepers or any of those things because I hear the wrong message. So. No, but it's all about, I think, letting them be empowered to be part of the decision also. Talk with them as opposed to tell them. Let's find a way that works best. Is this not a good spot for you? Do you need a little more quiet? I would say, though, the one thing I kept fighting, and we did a little bit, is if everyone is going to be on the Wi-Fi all at the same time, you may need to get some sort of extenders in the house or places where I won't be distracted by your conversation because your teacher is rambling on and I'm trying to focus on my math class. There might be some practical issues like that you might have to try and play around with a little bit.
I heard the Google Nest is the latest thing. I've heard that. You can buy a few of those and add them on. I'm not the tech guy, but a tech guy told me that's what it is. So routine is important. So I don't need to turn my literal, living room into a school and have, announcements over intercom and things like that. But
fire extinguisher on the wall.
Fire extinguisher. Yes.
Pencil sharpener over here.
But routine's important. So getting up at a certain time in the morning. Although I think some of the public schools are going to be starting sort of like regular hours. Is that correct?
So.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that might help.
Right.
Tammy, you've homeschooled for all of those years, so and there's a lot of parents watching now going, "Stupid us! We knew 2 years ago we should have started homeschooling. We'd be ahead of the game and whatever." What's your top tips like from what you've learned over the years that you would just say to people in the home environment, this is smart to do?
I think give yourself grace. Yeah, I mean, I think it's, but I think it's about learning to love to learn. It's not about being book smart. It's not about reading something in a book and regurgitating it out on a test.
Yeah.
It's about learning it for life.
Yeah.
And I think so often as we've homeschooled, or people who thinking about homeschooling, they're like, I can't teach my kids, algebra or something like that. But it's about learning together, Over the years, I've learned so much more than I did in school, But I think it's just coming alongside them, and there's a difference. Okay, so what we're talking about a lot right now is the public school kids doing their school at home.
Right.
And then there's a homeschool where, as a parent, I choose my curriculum. I get to choose what and how we're going to learn. So there's two aspects here, From my point of view, it's like as the curriculum that I get to choose, I learn alongside them, and then I know what they're learning. And this is
really good.
the benefit also for being at home. But I'm learning what they're learning. So when we're out in public, when we're allowed to go, we see life, and we're like, this is what we just learned, at home, that kind of a thing. But also as parents, part of schooling is learning how to cook. I mean, I don't tell my kids, but when they sit down and play games, I don't tell them that they're learning math or, we have an allowance game. I'm not telling them it's about finances. I'm not telling them it's about, so it's just having fun learning.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Your kids have no
really good.
excuse to say fine when you ask how school was, because you know exactly what they learned.
Exactly.
Do I was finding that as well, like with your classes. I mean, I was like coming out of one Zoom and maybe going to get a coffee, and Abigail was in this enthralling lecture, and I had to go back on another Bayside Zoom and listen to Pastor Kurt. Wasn't easy. So, but that aspect of learning with them, I think that's liberating now for some parents. But what about the parents that are going, I want to sit and learn. I would love to do algebra all day, but I'm trying to run a business, dad's at home trying to run a business. Mom's had to go back on the road in a limited way or whatever. What do we say to those parents that are just going, that's tough? Any thoughts or any ideas of how we can encourage them, how to juggle that, or at this moment in time?
In our district, we're going to be asked to do live lessons, but we're going to be required to tape those lessons. So parents and I did have parents who, in the spring, they did all their schooling from 5 to 8 at night because that's when they could. Right. So that will be available, and I think that will be, I mean, a first grader, you have to come alongside them. They just aren't going to be able to do it on their own, or somebody's going to have to come alongside. And I know that's going to be one of the questions I ask at my back to school night when I'm meeting with each family is, who will be the person? And sometimes it was the 4th grade brother, and that was fine. It was totally fine. But there does have to be someone designated to come along. And so I think just knowing that there will be, teachers will be willing to work with you, and schools understand, and no one expects you to fit into this, the same schedule as everybody else if you can't. We hope that it will work for a lot of people, but we know that it won't work for everybody. So,
yeah. it's a time of massive pressure for parents
it
to try,
is.
because they would love to take time out, but they still got to pay bills, and they're considering so much. So, and that's an awful lot of the reason why we're doing this, is to make sure that they are supported as best as possible.
It reminds me of a story that her grandpa told me, because for those of us who are older, Time magazine came out with the greatest generation. I think it was 1999 or the year 2000, and they were talking about the people at World War II, and her grandpa was a World War II vet, and I talked to him about it, and I said, do you guys deserve it? Just, what do you think about this? And he was great. He said, you know what, we did a lot of stuff in World War II, and it's what we had to do. But if there was anybody I really admired, it was my parents, and watching them go through the Great Depression for 10 years and everything that they did just to try to hold the family together. Our kids are learning a lot from us. They're not just learning their academics. They're going to learn how we as adults handle this pressure, handle this time. And if we can kind of remember that they're watching us all the time, even when they're not paying attention to us, they are watching us. How do we handle not being able to do everything the way we would like it to be done? And sometimes good is good enough. If we just need to get through this, and we're going to keep in there, and we're not going to snap at each other, we're going to try to remember what comes first. And it's, relationship with each other, relationship with God, all these different things that we're always knowing that we're supposed to do. It's not like you're going to look back at your life and go, I should have done his multiplication tables 3 more times before.
Yes.
Help them learn what are really important elements of being a human and being a parent, and they're going to pick those up, and those will be those life lessons they're going to have long term. And it's okay to not be great at this. It's just okay.
Oh yeah. So help me on this one. So back in Ireland, there was a lady came to our church when she was the only teacher, which made her the principal in Ireland's smallest school. It's the smallest school in Ireland. The whole school had 15 children in it, and it was in rural Donegal, in the northwest of Ireland. And 15 students. She taught in Irish, the Gaelic, and she had from first grade right through to seniors in the same class. It was a bizarre thing that she had. I remember going to it one day and going in, and it was quite serene how she had it, and she had to go around. What about a parent who's in a home with elementary right through to high school? Any advice of going?
The children help each other.
Or high schoolers are in the yard. What do we do?
Well, I think it's collaborative, and I think the older students can help the younger students. And again, this is, when I think about how daunting this is for parents, their children are gone. We open at 8 and they leave at 3:15. And that's not the day we're looking at with online daily learning. And depending on the age, it could be 3 hours, could be 4. They're not going to spend 6 hours in front of a screen or doing assignments. But when you have various ages, you have to look at resourcing each of them in a way that, as a teacher in Ireland, she would give different tasks to different age groups. And then and teachers, we do leveled reading groups. And so you're working with one group, listening to them read out loud, while another group is working on their seat work, while another group is drawing a picture. So you figure out different tasks for each group. You work with one, give independent tasks to the other 2. And so that's one strategy to use. Or having an older child work with a younger child and coach him.
And I think some of this, so if you have a multi-sibling reality with different levels, I think some of this will become pretty obvious pretty quickly, because you might find that your 4th grader needs help with math, but is fine in the English and the history and the social sciences. And so maybe that's where you help over here, but your older kid might be having no problem at all with chemistry, but God help them, they can't put the equation together in IM3. So you might find that you can kind of shift. And once you kind of figure out where their strengths and weaknesses are, you can kind of adapt to that a little bit. You may not ever be able to be the teacher of those things, but you could be just more supportive when they're in that class, because they'll be broken up. I'm assuming that most of the elementary schools are still going to have math at a certain time, English at writing at a certain time. So you'll be able to figure out the pattern probably within about 3 weeks, what your kids need and where they're strong and where they, if they love a particular class, you can leave them for an hour because they're really into that teacher or whatever. And you can go focus on this other student, this other child. So.
Yeah, that's a lot what we do. I may have reading time with, one, and then at that time. The other one is doing independent work.
Right.
Okay.
You know, that kind of thing. But there's also opportunities where we all sit together and read together.
Yeah.
Where I'm reading. The beauty that we get to do is we do missionary stories. You know, so we all sit and read. And some of my kids they'll come back and want to, you know, if I'm teaching my youngest, the other one might come back and go, oh, I love this book. And they'll sit down and read it along with us. So it's kind of an opportunity for them also to just be together and to listen together. You know what I mean? You have both their attention.
Another positive of homeschooling is that you get to share your faith as you're teaching, right? That's
Which is fabulous.
Devotions are school.
So this could be a season for you know, some parents might go, actually homeschooling could be an option for the future. This is an introduction. I love the phrase you're using as well, online daily learning. Because that sounds very accessible to me, of let's have a season of online daily learning. And whereas going to homeschooling just at the moment, I just feel it's like, wow, I feel so inept. Talk to me about this subject here, discipline. Can you expel your kids? I just want to know that. I want to go in knowing my rights.
If your word against there that they brought some sort of weapon to home, then you can do that.
Okay. No, I want some more advice from you before we end, and that simply is what is your top tip? If it was one-on-one with that parent right now that is, let's say, not so much struggling, but is a little bit intimidated, but is willing. You know, they're going to do this. What would be your top tip at this moment in time? We'll go around.
Sure. My top tip would be that parents really open that dialogue between themselves and their children. Check in with their child emotionally. Ask, how are you doing with this whole thing? How are you feeling? You know, what thoughts are you processing? How can we process this together? And just give that child a safe space to express what they're going through, but then also have the parent show them, hey, mom and dad are feeling a lot of these same things. Let's work through this as a family. I think if your kids don't take anything else away from the learning at home or the homeschooling, the fact that they know they can come to you and that you guys are a team, I think is just invaluable.
I think one of the things I'm hearing from parents is, what if my child falls behind? And my thing in that is, what does that mean? You know, what is our fall behind of what? You know, are you talking about standards that the school has? Are you talking about their friends? You know what I mean? What does that mean? And I think to go, wait, what does that mean? And to think, yeah, maybe my student doesn't like math, but they're great at English or writing. The beauty of right now is you see, okay, let's go with this writing more. You know, let's encourage them in what they're good at and what they enjoy. We'll get through the math.
Right.
You're not going to fall behind. And that was one of my big things when I first started. As a kindergartner in first grade, second grade, I was so afraid that I wasn't teaching enough to my kids, or to my first one. And my husband being a public school teacher, I'd be like once a week, honey, can you just test her?
Yeah.
Could you just test her reading?
It's hilarious.
And it's like, he would be like, okay. And, you know, in fourth grade, I was still, test her. And he would say, okay, fourth grade, she's reading at the 9th grade level. You're doing fine. You know, because what we forget is it's one-on-one time for homeschooling. You know what I mean? That's really, so they're not going to fall behind. If you think about, my husband always would say, I don't teach as much as you do in one day. And I think, oh, I didn't get through what I wanted to get through today. So it's like, that gave me so much freedom to just say, you know, I taught what I could, and because it was one-on-one or one-on-3, whatever it was, we got through a lot more learning than you would in a public situation where you have 30 kids and he's like, I got to teach to the middle kid, you know, where I'm teaching specifically. So it's like, don't worry about your kids falling behind.
They're going to do okay.
And if they do, they'll catch on once they get back to school. So, yeah.
I think to piggyback on what Chelsea said, just for typical kids too, that social emotional time right now is as important as the academics, because this is a different season for them as well. And so just understanding and checking in with them and listening and being present. But then for you, the parent too, make sure you process this, create a team of other parents, and communicate with the teacher. Always communicate. We are here to help. It's a partnership. If you're struggling, if you need different options, reach out to the teacher. We're in this together. We keep hearing that. We're in this together, but we're really in this together. So reach out to the teacher, and don't forget that they're learning at the same time you're learning, and we want to support one another through this. So communicate, process, and also just be present for your kids. And if they don't get math that day, but you baked a cake together,
Right.
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah,
And so these
absolutely.
are life lessons and time that we'll never get back. Who would have thought we'd be at home, that we wouldn't have, we can't go to the mall, we can't go to church the way we used to go, but it's given us the freedom to have time to create memories and to really create a different sense of family. So,
Absolutely.
Well, I think something that Brandon said, just the parents' attitude and how they're approaching this is going to be reflective of how the children approach this. So even, this is not my first choice, and it wasn't in the spring. I really don't care for it at all, but of course, I'm gonna have my best face on every day. I'm gonna come and I'm gonna look happy to be on that Zoom call, and I'm gonna look happy to have my dog running behind me, and and really a parent's attitude. And we see that with our son. We have to really check in with Adam. I mean, he's 15, he can really disappear back into that bedroom, and we have to make sure that we're putting our best foot forward for him, so he feels like, this is going to be okay, and I'm going to get through this, and it's not where I want to be. I'd rather be at school with my friends, but we try to make it very positive for him, and we do see that reflected in his attitude. So I think that's really important.
Well, and I think even little guys are really perceptive at picking up the difference between you going through a script and giving them words and things they're supposed to do, and then you really living it. I mean, you can even look at all the Leviticus, right? All the laws, but then here comes a guy who actually walks it and does it.
Yeah.
And so they're going to be watching us all through this, even if they're kind of grumping and doing whatever. So I would just really, from a parenting perspective, just try to really bite your tongue when you just feel that moment, because you're stressed that you didn't get your quarterlies in time. The Wi-Fi's cut out on your Zoom meeting with your clients, and everyone, that tendency to snap at the people we love the most is a really bad place to go to, but it's an easy place to go to. And it may not be anything physical, it just might be emotional, but the kids remember this stuff, and if you can just really just take that breath, help teach them how to process difficult situations and see the best of it. There's some great things that could come out of this. I think on that level, there's something to be said. Take time to ride motorcycles around somebody else's filming, to do those kind of things and bond that way.
Yeah.
Academically, from my perspective, there's two things I think we got to keep in mind, because you don't want kids to fall behind, but we have this weird kind of game of competing and getting ready for college, and everybody's trying to get their GPAs up. And so by the time they get to high school, it's much more intense. We have so many kids in the Granite Bay area, every school district it does, but that are doing AP. And so what we've been told is on a normal year, we have an hour and a half with the kids. Now we have an hour. So by the end of 1 week, I will have lost 2.5 hours of teaching time with the kids each week, every week for the 18 weeks. So when you have established curriculum, like an AP test curriculum that Abby had to learn to get through, something's going to give somewhere. The kids will, as kids do, react to homework, because it's boring enough to be sitting in the Zoom thing for 4 hours. Now I got 4 hours of homework that I got to do, but something's going to give. So just taking it all with a grain of salt, and maybe we don't do the homework tonight. And most of the teachers have figured out ways to work around late policies and projects and give them a little grace to turn something in a little bit later. But when it comes to academics, I think my one thing I would say is, not dissimilar to parenting in general, is you really need to not just go through the motions of, did you get your homework done? Yes. Did you do this? I mean, we all know there's a federal law that kids from about 7th grade all the way to their sophomore year are required by law to only give one-word answers to any parental question. And it sometimes doesn't even have to be a word. It can just be a grunt of some sort or another.
My kids are so obedient to that law.
But don't give up on it. Sooner or later, they will start to talk, and they're going to handle this differently. Socio-emotionally, they're going to handle this differently. So kids who could thrive in school have never been a problem might just become unhinged, and you're going to have to be patient with that. So be patient with yourself, be patient with your kids, and just know that hopefully with the vaccine, this too shall pass, and we'll all make it through this. So
Fabulous. Well, I'm feeling a lot more confident. I'm going to go home and tell Isabella where she's been getting it wrong, and just, you know. No, seriously, this has been an absolute source of incredible information for me, and I suppose as well, thank you guys. Thank you for what you do as parents, as just community leaders in our community. I think it's really important that, you know, that we say thank you. And as you said, it's brilliant. We are all in this together. And I suppose the one thing I would just say from a pastoral point of view as well, it's just, I think it's important that we pray for our kids. Pray for our kids, and we want to educate them, and part of actually leading them spiritually from Scripture is training them in those ways and being really practical. But I encourage you, you know, I think for every parent, it's just even taking the time to pray for them. Sometimes we don't know what to pray for. It's hard, but just pray for them. But thank you so much. Invaluable stuff. Let's keep the conversation going. And I think you've helped people turn their living room into a classroom. Thank you.